The congressional hearing room was full. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and every seat was taken. It was not just another hearing. Today, something big was going to happen. The air was thick with tension. Everyone had their eyes on one person, Jasmine Crockett. She sat quietly at the center table, her face calm, but her hands were tightly clenched under the desk. Jasmine Crockett had become famous in American politics. She was young, sharp, and bold. She had faced some of the biggest names in politics and never stepped back. She fought Marjorie Taylor Greene in heated debates. She even clashed with Donald Trump on social media, once calling him out when he called her low IQ. People loved her fire. Her supporters called her a hero for the people. Her enemies called her dangerous. But today was different. Today, she was not the fighter. She was the one under attack. Pam Bondi entered the room with slow, confident steps. In her hand was a thick file of documents. She placed the file on the table with a heavy sound that made the room even more silent. Pam Bondi was not just a lawyer. She was a known fighter for the Republican side. A sharp prosecutor who once stood with Trump. Today, she did not come to argue. She came to destroy. Republican members of Congress sat back in their chairs with cold smiles. They were waiting for Crockett to fall. Some of them had tried to defeat her before, but this time they believed they had her cornered. Democratic members were whispering to each other. Fear was in their eyes. They did not know if they could save her. The news cameras were ready. Reporters were live on major channels. Social media feeds exploded as the hearing started. It was no longer just about Crockett. It had become a national story. People were watching from homes, offices, and cafes. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. The gavel hit the desk and the hearing officially began. The room went completely silent. Pam Bondi stood up. Her voice was calm but cold. She started by reminding everyone that Crockett was not just a leader. She was a public servant who must follow the law. Then she slowly opened her file and took out the first piece of evidence. "This," Bondi said, holding up a printed document, "is not just paper. This is a connection. This is a link between Congresswoman Crockett and a covert political group operating with international funding." The room gasped. Crockett's eyes did not move, but her fingers pressed harder against the table. Bondi continued, "This group has been working under the radar. They are connected to foreign agents. Money has moved through hidden accounts. And this money, ladies and gentlemen, was used to influence political decisions inside our own Congress." Reporters typed quickly, their phones buzzing with incoming updates. Crockett's lawyer stood up quickly, trying to stop the hearing. "This is outrageous. There is no proof these connections are illegal. You are trying to destroy her reputation with half-truths." But Bondi did not stop. "We will present the details. We will show the money trail. We will show who met whom and when. Congresswoman Crockett has been hiding behind loud speeches and emotional words, but today we will talk about cold, hard facts." Crockett looked straight at Bondi, her jaw tight. She had fought many political battles, but this was not a simple fight. This was a planned attack. Someone had gone deep into her past, digging for anything they could use to bring her down. Bondi's team placed more documents on the screen. They showed meeting dates, flight records, and bank transactions. Each slide was carefully chosen. Each detail pointed to a secret network. The Republican members leaned forward, satisfied. This was the moment they had been waiting for. They saw Crockett as a threat to their power, and now they believed they finally had the tool to remove her. The Democratic members whispered urgently. Some looked angry. Others looked afraid. The evidence was serious. If they could not fight it, Crockett might lose her seat in Congress. Crockett's heart pounded, but her face stayed strong. She knew that in politics, the battle was not always about truth. It was about who could control the story. Bondi had the story now. But Crockett still had her voice. She leaned toward her lawyer and whispered, "Let them show everything. We have our own story to tell." The hearing paused for a moment, but the storm was only starting. Outside, protesters were shouting. Some supported Crockett, holding signs that said, "Stand with Jasmine." Others demanded her resignation, shouting that she was a traitor. Inside, the tension was rising. Everyone knew this was not just about Jasmine Crockett anymore. It was about power, about control, and about what America would believe. Pam Bondi closed her file slowly and looked at Crockett with a cold smile. "This is just the beginning," she said. Crockett met her eyes, unblinking. "We'll see," she replied, her voice low but firm. The battle had begun. The hearing resumed after a short break, but the weight in the room only grew heavier. Reporters returned to their seats, their fingers already flying across keyboards, updating the world. The words breaking. Crockett facing foreign funding scandal flashed across live news tickers. The story was moving faster than anyone could control. Jasmine Crockett sat motionless as the next piece of evidence was introduced. Pam Bondi's team projected a series of email exchanges on the large screen behind her. The emails showed Crockett's team communicating with members of an international organization known for influencing elections abroad. The dates and subject lines were enough to make the room buzz with quiet murmurs. Pam Bondi's voice cut through the whispers like a blade. Congresswoman Crockett's public speeches call for transparency, but her private connections tell a different story. These communications are not about public service. They are about power, hidden power. Crockett's lawyer, Mr. Langston, quickly stood. "These emails show no illegal action. They are nothing but conversations with international advocacy groups that work openly across multiple countries. This is political theater, not a criminal case." Bondi didn't flinch. "Let the American people decide whether this is theater or betrayal." Crockett's breathing slowed. She knew that the courtroom was no longer her only battlefield. Outside, millions were watching and judging. She could feel the narrative slipping away from her. And if she didn't regain control, her political career would be over. Suddenly, Bondi shifted her strategy. She requested that a surprise witness be called. The name was announced. Daniel Marks, a former staff member from Crockett's campaign. The room stirred in shock. Daniel walked in too. The hearing room, his face tense. He had worked with Crockett for 2 years, once trusted, now sitting on the other side. Crockett's heart sank. She whispered to her lawyer, "He wouldn't do this. He wouldn't betray me." But Bondi looked certain. "Mr. Marks has provided a sworn affidavit that he witnessed multiple undisclosed meetings between Congresswoman Crockett and foreign operatives." Daniel sat down, his hands shaking slightly. Bondi wasted no time. "Did you or did you not accompany Congresswoman Crockett to an off-the-record meeting in Geneva last summer?" Daniel looked at Crockett briefly before answering. "Yes, I was there." The words hit Crockett like a punch to the stomach. "Did she instruct you to keep that meeting secret from her official schedule?" Bondi pressed. Daniel hesitated, the weight of the moment visible on his face. "Yes, she said it wasn't for public knowledge." Reporters burst into a frenzy, their phones buzzing with instant headlines. "Secret meetings confirmed." Crockett's lawyer quickly objected. "This testimony is incomplete. It does not prove any wrongdoing. A meeting is not a crime." But the damage was done. Public perception was shifting. For the first time, Crockett's composure cracked. She looked at Daniel, her former ally, with a mix of shock and sadness. She whispered under her breath, "Why, Daniel? Why now?" Daniel avoided her gaze. The chairman of the committee called for order. The room slowly settled, but the storm inside Crockett's mind continued. She was now trapped between public shame and political survival. Bondi wasn't finished. She revealed the next document, an audio clip. This Bondi said, her voice cutting through the silence. Is Congresswoman Crockett's voice in a private conversation recorded 2 months ago? The audio played. Crockett's voice was clear. She sounded frustrated. If they keep pushing me, I swear I'll burn them all down. I'll make sure their careers are over. The sentence echoed in the hearing room like a bomb. Bondi let this silence settle before speaking again. These are not the words of a public servant. These are the words of someone willing to cross every line to protect herself. Crockett's lawyer fought back. This was a private conversation taken out of context. No crime has been committed, but the Republicans didn't care. The headlines didn't care. The story had already left the hearing room and spread like wildfire. Outside the courthouse, the protests grew louder. Some shouted her name in support, others screamed for her to resign. Crockett's phone buzzed constantly with incoming messages. Some were from allies offering quiet support. Others were from political friends, now turning away from her. Some messages simply read, "You need to step down." Her breathing grew heavier, but she refused to look weak. She straightened her back and locked eyes with Pam Bondi. "Is this it?" Crockett asked quietly. "Is this the best you have?" Bondi's cold smile returned. "Oh no, we're just getting started." Crockett knew that next hours would decide everything. Her career, her reputation, maybe even her freedom. The storm was nowhere near over. The hearing room was electric now, the tension almost unbearable. Jasmine Crockett sat still, but her mind raced. She could feel her political world crumbling piece by piece. The emails, the surprise witness, the secret audio each step had tightened the noose around her. But she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Her lawyer, Mr. Langston, leaned in close. "We can push back. If we can break Daniel Marks' credibility, we might stop this bleeding." Crockett nodded, her jaw tight. Her whole career had been built on resistance, on standing tall when others tried to silence her. She couldn't fold here, not in front of the cameras, not in front of her enemies. The chairman pounded the gavel. "Order. We will now hear the cross-examination of Mr. Marks." Langston rose, his steps calm but his voice sharp. He focused on the witness. "Mr. Marks, you worked closely with Congresswoman Crockett for 2 years. "Yes," Daniel answered, his voice trembling slightly. "You attended meetings, handled scheduling, and were trusted with private information." "Yes." Langston's eyes narrowed. "So, Daniel, isn't it true that you left her campaign after a financial dispute? That you were denied a promotion?" Daniel shifted in his seat. "That's not yes or no." "Yes." Langston stepped forward. "So your testimony could be seen as revenge, perhaps?" Bondi objected quickly. "Speculation," the chairman overruled. "Proceed." Langston smiled slightly. "Daniel, did Congresswoman Crockett ever instruct you to accept money from any foreign agent? Did she ever ask you to break the law?" Daniel hesitated. "No, no further questions." A slight murmur passed through the room. Langston had cracked the witness, if only a little. Crockett's supporters outside would seize on this moment. But was it enough? Bondi was quick to move on. She called the next witness a financial analyst from the Department of Justice who had traced the funding of several activist groups. Connected to Crockett, the analyst detailed transactions showing large sums of money moving from foreign organizations into nonprofit groups that supported Crockett's campaigns. It wasn't direct, but it was close enough to raise serious questions. Bondi's words were sharp. While no direct payment has been proven, the financial web is clear. Congresswoman Crockett benefited from international money to strengthen her political base. Langston argued this is guilt by association. Political campaigns rely on broad support. None of these donations broke the law. But Bondi smiled, knowing she had already planted the seed of doubt. Maybe not illegal, but unethical. That's for this committee to decide. As the hearing dragged on, Crockett's phone buzzed again. This time, the message came from someone she hadn't heard from in years, Robert Maddox, an old political fixer known for his deep connections and secret deals. The message was simple. They're using your past against you. Meet me. I have information. Her pulse quickened. Robert Maddox had disappeared from Washington's front line years ago. He was reaching out now. Something serious was at play. But there was no time to leave. The hearing was moving fast. Suddenly, a live video call was requested by an international journalist. The committee surprisingly approved it. The journalist was from a European news outlet and had uncovered files that connected the same foreign donors from Crockett's network to several other politicians, including some of Crockett's loudest Republican critics. As the journalist spoke, faces around the room changed. Story wasn't as one-sided as it first appeared. Money from these organizations had quietly reached across party lines. The room filled with an uncomfortable energy. Crockett's eyes lit up with a spark of hope. This could shift the narrative. Bondi quickly moved to shut it down, claiming the journalist's evidence was unverified. But the seed of doubt was now spreading in the room, among the public, and even among Crockett's enemies. Langston whispered to Crockett, "If we can prove they targeted you while hiding their own connections, this whole case could collapse." Crockett's breathing steadied. The hearing was not over, but for the first time it felt like she had a path forward. The chairman announced a recess. Crockett stepped outside briefly, her security detail surrounding her as protesters screamed. From both sides, she quickly called Robert Maddox. His voice was low, serious. "They knew you were becoming a problem. This isn't just about you, it's about silencing a movement." "What do you have?" she asked, her voice firm. "There's a meeting tonight. People from both sides will be there. Deals are being made behind closed doors." Crockett felt the fire in her chest return. "Send me everything." He hesitated. "If you go down this road, there's no going back. I was never here to play it safe," she said, and ended the call. As she returned to the hearing room, her steps were steady. She knew the battle wasn't just for her seat in Congress anymore. It was for exposing the rot in the system itself. The storm was still raging, but now she was ready to fight back. The hearing room was electric now, the tension almost unbearable. Jasmine Crockett sat still, but her mind raced. She could feel her political world crumbling piece by piece. The emails, the surprise witness, the secret audio each step had tightened the noose around her. But she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Her lawyer, Mr. Langston, leaned in close. "We can push back. If we can break Daniel Mark's credibility, we might stop this bleeding." Crockett nodded, her jaw tight. Her whole career had been built on resistance, on standing tall when others tried to silence her. She couldn't fold here, not in front of the cameras, not in front of her enemies. The chairman pounded the gavel. "Order. We will now hear the cross-examination of Mr. Marks." Langston rose, his steps calm but his voice sharp. He focused on the witness. "Mr. Marks, you worked closely with Congresswoman Crockett for 2 years. "Yes," Daniel answered, his voice trembling slightly. "You attended meetings, handled scheduling, and were trusted with private information." "Yes." Langston's eyes narrowed. "So, Daniel, isn't it true that you left her campaign after a financial dispute? That you were denied a promotion?" Daniel shifted in his seat. "That's not yes or no." "Yes." Langston stepped forward. "So your testimony could be seen as revenge, perhaps?" Bondi objected quickly. "Speculation," the chairman overruled. "Proceed." Langston smiled slightly. "Daniel, did Congresswoman Crockett ever instruct you to accept money from any foreign agent? Did she ever ask you to break the law?" Daniel hesitated. "No, no further questions." A slight murmur passed through the room. Langston had cracked the witness, if only a little. Crockett's supporters outside would seize on this moment. But was it enough? Bondi was quick to move on. She called the next witness a financial analyst from the Department of Justice who had traced the funding of several activist groups. Connected to Crockett, the analyst detailed transactions showing large sums of money moving from foreign organizations into nonprofit groups that supported Crockett's campaigns. It wasn't direct, but it was close enough to raise serious questions. Bondi's words were sharp. While no direct payment has been proven, the financial web is clear. Congresswoman Crockett benefited from international money to strengthen her political base. Langston argued this is guilt by association. Political campaigns rely on broad support. None of these donations broke the law. But Bondi smiled, knowing she had already planted the seed of doubt. Maybe not illegal, but unethical. That's for this committee to decide. As the hearing dragged on, Crockett's phone buzzed again. This time the message came from someone she hadn't heard from in years, Robert Maddox. An old political fixer, known for his deep connections and secret deals. The message was simple. They're using your past against you. Meet me. I have information. Her pulse quickened. Robert Maddox had disappeared from Washington's front line years ago. He was reaching out now. Something serious was at play. But there was no time to leave. The hearing was moving fast. Suddenly, a live video call was requested by an international journalist. The committee surprisingly approved it. The journalist was from a European news outlet and had uncovered files that connected the same foreign donors from Crockett's network to several other politicians, including some of Crockett's loudest Republican critics. As the journalist spoke, faces around the room changed. Story wasn't as one-sided as it first appeared. Money from these organizations had quietly reached across party lines. The room filled with an uncomfortable energy. Crockett's eyes lit up with a spark of hope. This could shift the narrative. Bondi quickly moved to shut it down, claiming the journalist's evidence was unverified. But the seed of doubt was now spreading in the room, among the public, and even among Crockett's enemies. Langston whispered to Crockett, "If we can prove they targeted you while hiding their own connections, this whole case could collapse." Crockett's breathing steadied. The hearing was not over, but for the first time it felt like she had a path forward. The chairman announced a recess. Crockett stepped outside briefly, her security detail surrounding her as protesters screamed. From both sides, she quickly called Robert Maddox. His voice was low, serious. "They knew you were becoming a problem. This isn't just about you, it's about silencing a movement." "What do you have?" she asked, her voice firm. "There's a meeting tonight. People from both sides will be there. Deals are being made behind closed doors." Crockett felt the fire in her chest return. "Send me everything." He hesitated. "If you go down this road, there's no going back. I was never here to play it safe," she said, and ended the call. As she returned to the hearing room, her steps were steady. She knew the battle wasn't just for her seat in Congress anymore. It was for exposing the rot in the system itself. The storm was still raging, but now she was ready to fight back. The hearing room was no longer the same place it had been when the session started. What had begun as a direct attack on Jasmine Crockett had now spiraled into something far more dangerous. The walls of power that had been carefully built to control the outcome were starting to crumble. And Crockett, who many expected to fall silently, was still standing. Reporters outside were scrambling to update their stories. News channels flashed breaking headlines every few minutes, trying to keep up with the rapid shifts. Social media platforms exploded with live commentary. Crockett was trending worldwide, but not as a fallen star now. She was the center of a much bigger question. Who was really pulling the strings in Washington? Inside the hearing room, Pam Bondi sat stone-faced. But her hand subtly tapped the tabula, tiny sign that she felt the ground slipping beneath her. The chairman announced that both sides would now have the opportunity to cross-examine witnesses. Bondi wasted no time. Psst. She called a former aide from Crockett's office, someone she believed could turn the room back in her favor. The aide, nervous, but prepared, testified that Crockett had known about the international donors and had failed to report them, possibly breaking ethics rules. Bondi's questions were sharp and relentless. She was trying to corner Crockett with technical violations, painting her as someone who ignored the law when it was convenient. Crockett's legal team listened carefully but didn't interrupt. Langston scribbled notes rapidly. When it was his turn, his questions were calm but deadly. He asked the aide, "Did you also attend a fundraiser organized by those same donors?" The aide paused. Yes, Langston's voice didn't rise. "Did you also travel on flights paid for by those same donor groups?" Another pause. Yes. "And did you report those gifts to the ethics committee?" Silence. Langston looked straight at the chairman. Selective prosecution is a dangerous weapon. The hearing room was silent again, but this time the silence worked against Bondi's narrative. The lines she had drawn were beginning to blur. Suddenly, a staffer handed Bondi a message. As she read it, her eyes narrowed. The journalist Robert Maddox had just gone live on a major news network, presenting leaked internal emails that connected not only Crockett's critics, but also several high-ranking members of TROC to foreign lobbyists. The emails showed conversations about targeting progressive lawmakers through a media campaign designed to ruin their credibility. The hearing room buzzed with whispers. Bondi realized she was losing control of the story. Crockett's phone vibrated. A simple text from Maddox appeared. "I told you, it's bigger than you think." Langston quickly stood and requested that the committee review the Maddox report as part of the hearing evidence. The chairman, now clearly unsettled, allowed it. Bondi pressed on, determined to salvage her strategy. She presented classified security footage showing Crockett in meetings with foreign businessmen. She tried to frame these as secret alliances. But Crockett finally spoke. That meeting was part of an official diplomatic exchange. It's the same kind attended by dozens of other members of Congress, including some sitting right here. Gasps filled the room. She wasn't lying. The records backed her. The hearing was now spinning into dangerous territory. It was no longer about Crockett's guilt. It was about what the investigation had uncovered by accident. Spanning both political parties had been exposed. The chairman paused the hearing, declaring an emergency. Recess. Crockett's team gathered quickly outside the chamber. Langston looked at her seriously. "We can walk away now, and maybe you keep your seat. Or we can push harder, and we might tear the whole thing down." Crockett thought for a moment, then said, "We finish what we started." Meanwhile, Bondi stepped into a private conference room, answering a call from a blocked number. The voice on the other end was firm. "You need to contain this. You're not just cleaning up Crockett, or protecting us." Bondi's jaw tightened. "I'm aware," the caller added. "If you can't finish this quietly, we will." For the first time, Bondi realized she wasn't the one in charge. She was just another piece in someone else's larger game. As the media storm grew outside and the hearing prepared to resume, everyone inside that building knew the next steps wouldn't just decide Crockett's future, they might shake the entire political structure. Crockett's heart pounded, but her voice was steady when she told Langston, "I'm not backing down. Not now." The final battle was about to begin. The hearing resumed after the emergency recess, but everything felt different now. The room that had once seemed firmly under Pam Bondi's control was now restless, uncertain, and dangerously unstable. Cameras were still rolling. Journalists were still live. But now the story wasn't just about Jasmine Crockett, had grown into something that could expose a deep web of power, influence, and secret political deals. Crockett sat straighter in her chair. The panic that had once lived in her eyes was gone. Her legal team had given her enough space to see the larger game, and now she was ready to play it. Pam Bondi returned to her seat, but the calm, icy confidence she had displayed earlier was cracked. The call from her shadowy contact still echoed in her mind. She realized she had two battles now, one against Crockett and one against the people who wanted this scandal buried quickly. Representative Harold Vance, the Republican chairman, tapped the gavel to bring order. We will now hear final arguments and review new evidence submitted during recess. Langston stood first. His voice was measured, but his words landed like sharp punches. This hearing was supposed to examine the actions of Representative Crockett, but it has revealed something far more dangerous: a coordinated effort to weaponize congressional investigations against political opponents. He paused and held up the printed Maddox report. This is not just about one congresswoman. This is about a system where both parties have quietly accepted foreign influence, hidden behind legal technicalities and selective outrage. Some members of Congress shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Cameras caught everything. Langston continued, "Selective prosecution destroys public trust. And public trust, ladies and gentlemen, is the foundation of our democracy." The chairman looked uneasy, but allowed him to continue. Pam Bondi rose. Her voice was sharp again, but something was missing her momentum. Representative Crockett's behavior cannot be ignored simply because the process has uncovered broader corruption, Bondi argued. We must hold her accountable. But even as she spoke, alerts buzzed on phones throughout the room. New leaked documents, more emails. The web was expanding. Reporters whispered among themselves. The public was already ahead of the hearing. Hashtags were trending that accused the government of covering up elite corruption while hunting down political opponents. The public narrative was shifting rapidly, slipping out of Bondi's control. Suddenly, Crockett asked to address the room directly. The chairman hesitated, but allowed it. Crockett's voice was steady. "I didn't come here today expecting to win. I expected to survive. But what I see now is bigger than me." She looked around the room, straight into the cameras. "I've made mistakes. I've been loud. I fought dirty sometimes. But I never sold out my country. Can everyone in this room say the same?" A heavy silence fell. "You want to investigate? Me. Do it. But investigate yourselves too. Follow the same trail you've been using to chase me. See where it really leads." Some members looked away. Others stared at her, unsure how to respond. Crockett wasn't asking for mercy. She was challenging the entire system. Bondi knew the fight was slipping out of her grasp. She called one final witness, a security analyst who claimed Crockett's connections posed a risk to national security. Langston cross-examined quickly. "Is it true that your security firm also provided services to several members of Congress currently under investigation for foreign lobbying?" The analyst's face paled. "I'm not authorized to discuss specific clients," Langston pressed. "But you can confirm that your firm worked with them?" The analyst hesitated. "Yes." Langston stepped back. "Thank you." That's all. The story was collapsing on itself. Bondi's final blow was weak. The narrative was breaking apart. Not because Crockett was perfectly clean, but because the same dirt touched almost everyone else too. The chairman announced that the committee would take the evidence under review and issue a recommendation. Crockett left the hearing room to a swarm of reporters. She gave no speech, just a few words. "This isn't over." Bondi stood alone, watching as Crockett disappeared through the crowd. Her phone buzzed again, a text from the same blocked number. "You failed. Prepare for consequences." For the first time, Bondi felt truly afraid. Alex Sten walked beside Crockett as they pushed through the press. "You just changed the battlefield," he said. Crockett replied, "Good. I never wanted to fight on their terms anyway." But they both knew the storm was not over. It was only growing. The final decision was still coming. And it would not only determine Crockett's fate, but could expose a network powerful enough to destroy anyone who got. To close, the real war was about to begin. The sun was setting over Washington, D.C., but the city was wide awake. News helicopters circled the Capitol, Reporters flooded the streets, and the entire nation seemed frozen, waiting for the decision from the House Ethics Committee. Jasmine Crockett sat quietly in her apartment, staring at the television but not really watching. Her phone buzzed, nonstop messages from supporters, threats from enemies, calls from journalists desperate for an exclusive. She ignored them. Langston entered the room, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of her. Decisions coming in an hour. She nodded, her expression unreadable. "Do you think they'll remove me?" Langston paused. They might. But if they do, they'll be burning themselves with the same fire they lit." The evidence that had come out during the hearing didn't just expose Jasmine's connections. It had cracked open a door into something far bigger: bipartisan corruption, foreign influence, secret deals, and political manipulation at the highest levels. Crockett's case had become the match that could set the whole system on fire. Suddenly, a call came through from Robert Maddox. "You're on speaker," Langston said as he answered. Maddox's voice was sharp. The story's exploding. More files dropped. "International money didn't just touch your campaign, Jasmine. It's tied to people sitting on that very committee." Crockett closed her eyes for a second. "Will they let it reach the public?" "They don't have a choice now," Maddox said. "The documents are everywhere. Independent journalists have them. Foreign media is covering it. The leak is out of their hands." Langston frowned. "So they'll try to protect themselves. They already are," Maddox said. 2 members of the committee suddenly called for a full ethics review of all congressional campaigns over the last 5 years. "They're moving to make this bigger so they can hide in the crowd." Crockett let out a cold laugh. "So now they're turning the fire toward everyone, hoping they won't burn alone," Maddox added. "But Bondi's handlers are panicking. Word is they're planning to pin the leak on you." "Let them," Crockett said. "I'll take the hit if it means the truth survives." Langston glanced at her. "You really mean that?" She nodded slowly. "I never cared about saving my seat. I cared about saving my voice." The clock ticked closer to the final decision. The Ethics Committee was preparing to announce their recommendation. Meanwhile, in a dark office across the city, Pam Bondi sat alone, reviewing the final script her team had prepared. But she wasn't reading it. Her mind was racing. Her political career, her connections, even her personal security, all of it now rested on whether she could distance herself fast enough from the collapsing narrative. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the blocked number. "Deliver the outcome. You will be the next headline." She stood, smoothed her blazer, and headed to the committee chamber. The cameras went live. The chairman called the room to order. "After reviewing the evidence, this committee recommends formal censure of Representative Jasmine Crockett. Number: Expulsion will be pursued at this time, but further investigations are to be expected." The room erupted. Journalists sprinted to their cameras. Headlines flashed across the screen. "Crockett survives. New corruption investigation opens." Langston smirked. "They tried to cut you out quietly." Crockett stood and faced the cameras. "They didn't clear me. They just tried to bury me." Pam Bondi avoided her gaze as she left the room quickly, whispering to her assistant, "Damage control. Now." But it was too late. Maddox had already gone live with another broadcast. This time, he named names both Republicans and Democrats, tied to foreign interests. The story was no longer Crockett's burden alone. It was a national scandal. Crockett's popularity skyrocketed overnight. Not because people believed she was innocent, but because she refused to back down when the system tried to crush her. As she walked out into the flashing lights and roaring questions, she didn't run from the media. She leaned into the microphone. "You wanted to silence me? But now the whole country is watching. Let's see who survives the next chapter." Langston joined her at her side. "They'll come harder next time." "I hope they do," Crockett replied, a small fire burning in her eyes. "I'm not done yet." And as she disappeared into the sea of reporters, the world understood. Jasmine Crockett had just become the most dangerous kind of politician, one who had nothing left to lose.